Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to take a look at how you can use some of the new features in the Vmix 27 beta to dynamically create different layouts on a Vmix preset. So, before I get into how we're going to do that, I just want to invite everybody, please, if you have any questions, any comments, get them posted below and we'll try to answer them live on air. Also, if you'd like to join us live on air, we do have a link in the show notes that you can click on down here on the screen that will let you connect with somebody in the studio and they'll get you on to join us on the show here. All right, so let me just give you a sense of what it is we want to do. So what I'm going to show you is this is a single input that we have set up here in our Vmix preset. And using some of the new features in Vmix 27, I have the ability to simply pop through and change different layouts dynamically, all using one input here on Vmix. And this gives us a lot of flexibility for different types of workflow setups. So this is, as we get into this, hopefully that will become clearer. But I just wanted to give you a sense of this is exactly how we are going to work with simply a limited number of inputs to do a whole set of different layouts. So before I dive into that, let me just get to the comments we have over here. So let's see. We have Spatial. Always good to see you here. Hopefully you get something out of this one. So thank you for joining. So, you the man, thank you for joining you. Oh, definitely appreciate it. Oh, caps lock. Yes, I know that problem. Done that many times. So Automation, hello. Thank you for joining us, Automation. Great to have you here. JP, thank you. Great to see you here. Samuel, thank you, Samuel. Good to have you here. Okay, so probably the best place to start is by looking first at sort of our Vmix session preset we have here. And as we look at this, I want to go over the basic model we're going to be using to execute on this. So our approach is that we are taking each one of these layouts that we have set up over here, and we're creating the layout description in an XML file. And we're setting those up so you can turn around and say, each layout is its own block of XML, and I can just add or change those layouts just by changing the XML file. We use dynamic value 1. So we have a way to, we'll set dynamic value 1 so that when we run the script that's reading this XML, we know which layout to use. And we are applying this layout to whatever input we have here in preview, provided it has a specific name. So this stops you from just trampling on other inputs that you may have set up in your Vmix session by an errant button push. So if we look here, we have, in this case now, we have 5 guest inputs. And these are just images that could be, anything from, Zoom guest, live to air guest, Vmix call guest, any of the above. And you can have these all sitting in here. And then what we have is we have 4 inputs that we set up that have a specific prefix in their name. It says layout panel. And we have layout panel A, B, C, and D. And by using that consistent layout panel name at the start of each one of these inputs, before we apply a different layout, we can check to say, does this input that I'm about to apply the layout to start with layout panel? And if it doesn't, we just say, oh, not going to do that. So that prevents you from stomping on things. And we'll show you that in the code. But the reason we have 4, we have the first 2, if you'll notice, I'll just click over here. These do not have any borders on them. The next 2 we have do have borders. And The reason we did this is because inside of Vmix 27, you still don't have the ability to specify or turn on and off borders. So what we needed to do is we needed to create a set of inputs that have borders and a set without. So all the layers specify borders on one, and all the layers do not specify borders, have borders off on the others. And the reason we have two is that you may want to be able to set up one layout, push it to program, and then have the second layout available for a new, the second input available for a new layout that you can then do merges or cuts, however you want. So this gives you a pair that you can do that with that have borders and a pair without. And realistically, this could work on any layer, and you could have any number of these layers set up if you wanted to just drive that off of XML. But we felt that this was, definitely a good way to do it. The other thing is, if you had the ability at some future point to specify borders, we could do all this using just two. The other thing that we did, because we work on whatever is in preview, is that inside of these inputs, we actually set up a trigger that said, if I'm pushing one of these inputs without borders to program, I automatically in preview load the other panel without borders. So that means that without having to do anything special, I have these two inputs set up and paired together. So if I put one in, it loads the other in preview. So that means that anytime you do anything with just selecting layouts into preview, you'll have the right type of border input set up there. And that's just something we did for this particular expression. It can be anything that you really want. So it's not really tied down to any, this is just specific for how we're working with this now. So that's pretty much the overall layout here that we have in the preset. For our production, we just have a set of buttons that will select the layout and assign it to preview, and then another set of buttons here on a Stream Deck that we can do different merges or whatever we want, between. So that just gives us an easy way to do the selection and to put on screen. But again, that's something that you could build around however you want to set up your production. So we have a few more comments here, so let me jump over to that, and then we'll dig into the XML a bit. So let's see. So Bill Ashton, Bill, great to see you here. Glad you could catch us live this week. And we have Very Scott. So good to see you here, Very Scott. All is going well here, so thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's dig into the XML that we're using to describe these different layouts here. So we basically have three tiers, sort of three nested elements inside our XML structure. Our outer, sort of our root element is just called layouts. This is where all of our individual layouts are in. Then inside of that, we have a set of element blocks called layout, and they each have an individual ID that we can use. And so this is where we have a description of all of the layers that are found inside of that layout. And these layers are broken down to the description, which says, which layer do I want this to apply to? So you can pick layers 1 to 10 to put it to. Which input do I want to assign to that layer? What's the zoom factor? And again, sort of 1 is fully zoomed, 2 is like double zoom, 200%, and it works down between 0 and 1 for sort of zoom percentage that you want for everything below that. So then we have X and Y. So what this is saying is, where do I want to position this layer on the screen? And positioning in Vmix, just so because it can be confusing. Positioning a layer on Vmix starts from the center point in the layer. So you're looking for what is that center point in the layer. And then if I move it to the left or to the right, you end up sort of making that adjustment around the center point. So if I want to move from the center point all the way to the left-hand side of the screen, that would be a -1. So it sort of percents up to there. But because it's the center point, what I've moved to the side of the screen is the center of the image. So basically, you'll have half the image sort of sitting there on the screen. So you have to go to -2 to move that totally off screen. And that gives you that sort of, I can go all the way to the left, fully off screen, from sort of half off -1, half fully off -2, to half off the right side as 1 and fully off as 2. So that's how you have to look at these values. So in this case, we're basically saying we're just moving, probably about like a quarter of the way off the screen to the left side, because we just have a negative value here. But that's how that would work. So we have that for the X and the Y positioning of this layer. We then have all the crop details here. Now, cropping is something else that, to understand, it's important for this. What you're saying with your crop is it's a percentage of the full image. So it isn't applied based on scale, like zoom factor or anything. What it's saying is take the original image that we had, or the original layer, and I measure everything from the left-hand side going in. So this is saying on the left-hand side, 25% of the way. So it goes from 0 to 1. Actually it's like 0.1. You can't go to 0 with cropping or anything. So you are, it's for this, you can't like do anything around anything outside of the 0 to 1 range. So that it has to sort of stay in there. You can't sort of negative or invert anything this way. So on the left-hand side, I'm saying go 25% of the image, regardless of its resolution, just 25% of this layer that I have here. And on the right, and this can be confusing, you're not measuring in from the right-hand side. You're saying, I want the right crop to be 75% over the image from the left-hand side. So it can be a little confusing because it's not sort of the symmetrical. I go from the left and then I go from the right. It is, everything's based on the left, and you just say my percentage is for left and the percentage for the right, but all based around from the left-hand side of the image. And again, it's the same with the top and the bottom. In this case, we're not cropping, so there's 0, which means I don't crop it off from the top, and the bottom is 1. But it works the same way. Everything is referenced off of the top and then works from that. And this is how we basically set up all of our layers. The other thing to keep in mind is because we control which layer this layout goes on, each one of these individual layer descriptions go on, you can stack the ordering any way you want. So if for certain cases you want to have something on top because you want other images to move below it when you sort of do merges, you can handle all of that in here. So it makes it very easy to manipulate things. And because this is XML, you could actually use scripting to change this dynamically. So you can sort of get sort of that inception view of just changing inside changing. But this gives you a lot of flexibility for how you want to lay these out. And with all of these laid out, I can then go and say, I just want to pick which one of these layouts I have set up and apply it. And so it becomes very simple. I can go in here and edit these any way I want. The other thing is I can move this around between different presets that I have. So if I have this set up as a whole range of different box layouts I want, I could use the same script with different presets. And as long as you have the layers named correctly with that sort of layer panel prefix, I could have totally different backgrounds and, any sort of foreground elements I want. Everything would work identically. So it lets you easily, from preset to preset, leverage all these different layouts that you have. So just a couple of points to keep in mind as we look through this. So with this in mind now, let's go and look at the code, the script code that actually is handling all this. And then we'll go back to the shortcuts and how that all ties together. So if I come over here, let me go to our script over here. So for the scripting of this, we have sort of our basic framework that we use, which defines everything at the top that we're going to be using, and then gets into the code right below that. And for this, we're basically doing a few things. First, we're finding what input is in preview, and we have to validate that that is one of the preview elements that we can apply a layout to. We have to read the XML file with the different layouts and select which one of those layouts that we want. So that's sort of everything we're setting up here. And so in this, we're doing things like, let me get the preview input, and so we can work with that. Let me get the title of the preview, which is whether we validate. So all of these things are in here. And these are the XML nodes and node lists that we're using to pull all that information in. We're just getting all those definitions done up front. So what we have here is this is all the information that we are pulling out of that XML file. And it basically lines up almost exactly with what we just discussed with the XML for the input, zoom, the XY position, and then all the cropping that we have for that input. So this setup now gives us, we have all the XML and we have the place to store all the values for the layout that we're going to be working with. And so since we're reading this XML as a file, this is all stuff we just did recently with how to work with XML. So we are reading this as a file, and we just have our file set up here, and we do the load for the layouts.xml. And then inside the layouts node, which is, we're going to pull the elements, this is an XML node list, we're pulling all of the elements that are tagged layout. So if you remember in the XML, we had a layout, then all under that, there are child elements for each one of the layers. So what we're doing is creating a node list with all the different layouts in it. And, from there, we could dig into the layers under each one of those layouts. And for this, we're just going and saying, we want to create an available count. Right? How many layouts do we have? Because if you are selecting something, you don't want to turn around and say, well, I selected layout 9, but I don't have a layout 9, so I sort of break what we're doing. So in addition to checking, can I apply this layout to this input by virtue of the proper title with layer panel, we're also going and saying, did you just ask me for a valid layout, for a layout that actually exists in my descriptor? Because if that's not there, then we will also stop and say, well, we're not going to do anything. So this is everything that we've set up. And then we sort of dig into, let's open up the Vmix XML. And from there, we're going to say, okay, what's our dynamic value? Which layout are we asking for? And we get that from right here. And then we're turning around and saying, and which input are we looking to apply this to? So this sort of gives us the two key things we need to move forward. And so this is just, the Vmix XML has Vmix preview, which tells us what input by a sort of a string-based number, which input is inside of our preview. And this we're just reading, from the dynamic value, which again, just gives me a string value with that dynamic value. And this is all our validation checks that we have here. So the first thing we're doing is we're going and saying, if the layout we've asked for is larger than the maximum number of layouts we have, then just exit, just not do anything. And our second check was around the preview name. And the way we do that is we go to the Vmix XML and we select a node. And if you remember a few shows ago, we went through how you describe the XPath to pull certain values out. And so what we're doing here is we're saying, I want to get the preview input. And so this is, because this is coming back as a list, because in theory there could be multiple in here, we're just taking item 0, which says take an XML node list and give me the first node. And that's all we're doing here. So I'm going to saying, give me the input with the number of the preview input that we want. So I'm looking at preview input, pulling it, and getting that as a node. And from the node, all I'm doing is saying take the preview input node and give me the value of the title. And with that, I've pulled in everything, and I can do, again, the same way we checked with number. Now we can just check with text to say if the title doesn't start with, and that's something we probably haven't used before, but I'm going and taking this string, and it has a method associated, which is starts with, and this is the valid preview title. And that's something we defined at the very top, which basically says layout panel in quotes. So this says if it doesn't start with that, exit. And so now we've done all the validation. We have a good layout. We have a good input to apply it to. So what we're going to do next now is we're going to go through and we're going to get all the layers that are associated with the selected layout. So if you come here, again, this is one of these XML things. We have an XML node list, which basically says, take my layouts XML and give me all the selected nodes for the layouts for the selected layout number. So I'm going to sort of saying, go to whichever layout number that I want, pull that in, and then give me all the layers under that. So it's basically walking down the XML tree through XPath. So I go to a specific layout that we want, and I'm creating an XML node list with all the layers for that layout. And so that's, now we have the data out of the file ready to go. And so the first thing I'm going to do is take that input, the input that's in preview, and I'm going to blank everything out. So all this is doing is just sort of resetting it to all its default values. There is no input associated with any of the layers. There's no zoom, no crop, and no extra positioning. Everything is just like sort of at your pristine new input state. So that lets us just reuse these inputs without having to worry about something I did in the past. So that's what we do right up here, and that just loops through the 10 layers. Now, we're actually going to go through and assign these basic details to each one of those layers as we loop through it. So we're going here and saying, well, how many layers are in this? So we look at the count. Again, this is things that we've done in the past. So we go, let me take whatever the selected layout layers are, and I'm going to say how many of them are there. So I know how many layers I have to work with, and I'm just looping layer at a time. I fill it in. So the first thing we're doing here is we are basically saying, let's take and get the selected layers XML. So we pull that out and create an XML node with all of the details. And then we are going through and pulling out the values of each one of the attributes. So if you remember how the XML was set up, we had the element of layer, but that each layer element had a whole set of attributes. That's how we described it. And that's what we're pulling out right here. These are all attributes set up for everything from, which layer do I want to which input and all the details from that. So with that set up, we're now going to start to apply these to our layers one at a time. And there's a few things I want to point out as we do this application here. First is that if you look at the function that we're calling, which is right here, sorry, let's see. Yes, so this is the one I'm actually looking at. So if we come around and look at this one right here, because a function call in Vmix, when you do an API.function call, the function you're calling is just a string. So this means that we can go in here and say, if I want to set layer 1 zoom, I can construct that as different string elements and concatenate them together to specify the function. So all I have to do as I go through this in a loop is to say, take whatever layer ID that I want. So when I take that layer, it says, which layer do you want to, when I take the layer descriptor, in that it says, what layer do I want to apply those attributes to? I'm just pulling that here and using that to create my function. So everything now is based on whatever I read out of that XML. That's the layer I'm working on here. And I'm just going through and again, doing sets for, the zoom, the X, Y positioning, and the crop. And crop, it comes as a single function. And I'm just pulling the different elements that we had, the left, top, right, and bottom. And we're putting those in there. And so I do that and I just loop through each one of these layers. And that's basically it. that's sort of even though it seems like, we have a lot of moving parts here, it actually is very, very straightforward what we're doing. Sort of reading attributes out of an XML file, validating that we can use them, pulling out the place we want to use them, and just clearing it out first, and then applying the attributes. So it's a very logical set of steps. But now, everything that I do, so if I come over here and let me give you a look at the Vmix output here. So you can see this. I have the ability to just take and have different layouts that I have set up. So, and then what I'm going to do is let me put in, so we have this, let me put in, so let's see, I'm not sure what's going on here. All right, so let me start here. So I have this set up here, and if I go and say I want to push this out, and then I'm going to take and set up a different, oh gosh, always hate it when things don't work the way I want them to. So if I have this set up here, I think I just something's wrong here with my triggers. But when I have this set up, this will allow me to do merges between things. So if I want to go in here and sort of do a fast merge, and then I can pick, let me get something else here. And so now with these different layouts that I have set up here, I have the ability to set these up as different, sort of merges. And so if I sort of go here, so now I could just go and by doing this, I have a second setup. So if we actually, let's go to the Vmix screen because that would make it a little easier, the UI screen here to see. So what I'm doing is I am taking and applying a layout by just sort of pushing a button, which has a different setup here. And then I can just go and I can do a merge for this. So this is a good example where, say I want to have, so this is a set of my guest here. So first I'd cut and they'd be sort of out on screen. Then if I want, I can come back and say, I want the first one to be sort of enlarged. And then I can just do a simple merge for that. And this would let me sort of bump through this. You can say I got the second one enlarged. But you'll notice that I am just using these two inputs to do this as I walk through this. And it means that I can create something that's pretty simple in terms of my preset, but still have very complex elements in this, like various detailed layouts. So that's sort of the overall output that I wanted to show everybody. Sorry, I had a bit of a hiccup there. But this should hopefully give you a good sense of what you can do with this and the simplicity of how you can leverage this inside a preset. And if you're using things like a control panel or something to just switch between inputs, this can make it a lot easier. Which basically, you don't have to have 8 or 10 inputs for all the different layouts. You can just turn around and say, I have my sort of input A, input B, and whichever is on, I'm just working with the other and switch between them. So that can make it a lot easier for certain things. Okay, so that's everything that I wanted to cover with this. Hopefully you'll find this useful. And as you look at this, look at it more generally to say what are different ways you could leverage this for different types of applications you have. You basically just have the ability to modify and control any layout on any input that you have here. And, there's different things that you may want to add to this over time. So I figured this is just a good starting point to get you thinking. And I also wanted to show out something that was uniquely available in the Vmix 27 beta. So if you are thinking about, do you want to upgrade now? How do you want to do that? This could give you a couple more real world use cases for something that is uniquely available in 27 versus Vmix 26. So, okay, so we're going to call this a wrap. And from there, if you can, I'd love you to stay for our post-show hangout, and we can talk about any of this or anything else, streaming, Vmix, creatives related. And, I'd be happy to do that. If you can stay, that would be great. If you can't, we should be back next week with another show. We have a few different ideas for that. Hopefully, we can sort of carry on thematically with looking at some of the things in Vmix 27 for that next show, because, I've been asked by a few people to sort of stay focused on that through the end of the year as people are deciding where to go. If you can't make it for the post show, be safe, be well, and I will see you next week. If you can, I'll see you in a minute. Take care. All right, welcome back to the post show. First, I want to say thank you, everyone, for forgiving me for taking a week off last week with Thanksgiving and everything we had sort of running right up into that. Thanksgiving in the United States, we just couldn't get the show together that we wanted to. So I appreciate that. Hopefully, if you did celebrate Thanksgiving, that you had a very relaxing and enjoyable time. We know these, these holidays, this whole holiday season is can be very busy for a lot of people. So it is nice every now and again to have just that downtime. So I appreciate all of you for, being understanding that I needed a little bit of that too. So the reason we sort of dove into some of these things with Vmix 27 is we think this capability to manipulate individual layers in far more detail than just sort of setting, are they visible or what's the input in them, is incredibly powerful and is going to allow you to do a lot of things that you couldn't easily do in any previous version of Vmix. So we've spent a bit of focus time on this. So like our previous show, we talked about how you can use a dial to control a number that you could use to select a graphic. The whole interface for working with the Stream Deck Plus, which has these dials, that's now been added to Vmix. So that added a whole new capability, and having that ability to sort of read what was in the dial, we leveraged some of this up here where you could actually just take an X position from an input and use that to assign a value that we were using to step through graphics. But it gave us, for the first time, the ability to take and just dial in a number that we wanted to use for something. So we thought that was powerful. And this sort of follows on from that. It's taking the mechanism that we used for grabbing the number and now saying, let's use it for what it was originally intended, which is controlling layouts and specifying everything around different input layers on an input. So we thought that was sort of a good progression. We are looking next at what we can do with controlling when something is in an input, in a layer already, sort of manipulating that. And so that's one of the shows that we're working on before the end of the year. So hopefully we'll have that one ready soon, because we think that's sort of a nice adjunct to what we just did, where you sort of assign the layers and their basic positioning inside a frame. And this sort of takes it that next level where you can start taking one of those and manipulating details in it, like positioning, zoom, other things. So we're working on that. And I think that's going to be, a great sequence of shows to look at, where you sort of can go through this as a group and get a good sense for the types of things you can do with Vmix 27. But For this year, we only have, I think, 3 shows left for this year. We probably won't be doing a show the Friday after Christmas. We'll do one before. So we think everything going up to, we have three more shows that will be left in December. And that will sort of see us out through the year. So if there are specific topics you want us to cover this year, just let us know. I think we have one show that's spoken for, but we have 2 more that we have some flexibility with. So if you have something specific you'd like us to dive into, Vmix 26, Vmix 27, we're sort of open around that. So just let us know, and we'll try to get something on this year's editorial calendar before we spring into next year. So anything feedback there, you can leave it in the comments here. You can also just post it in the Facebook group, so that would be good. So let's see. I don't see a lot of comments here. So if we've covered everything you're interested in, I think we can just give this a wrap. But again, we are always looking at new show topics, and especially if there are show topics outside of Vmix proper for things you like. Because I tend to focus a lot on the Vmix side. But if there are show topics for things with Photoshop, with DaVinci Resolve, with NDI, and where things have been going with NDI recently, any of those things, let's get them posted somewhere, and we'll get them on the editorial calendar for one of our shows, either this year or the start of 2024. And hello. Oh, so Ken, it's posted from Facebook. We still have issues with Vmix Social reading Facebook comments reliably, but thank you. I appreciate you joining. So thanks, Ken. Okay, so I guess with that we will wrap things up here. Hopefully you found this show useful, and we'll keep on with the poking into Vmix 27 and seeing some of the cool new things we can do with it. So until next week then, please everybody, be safe, be well, and I'll see you then. Take care.